Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Gasparilla mechanic dies in tragic workplace accident. 3 relatives detained in assault of 1-year-old girl. And internationally, doctor admits attempting to kill mother's partner with fake COVID-19 shots. Now for the details. A mechanic from Gasparilla has died after being critically injured while working on a dump truck. Police say Gavin Mungru was under the truck at Bull Fabricators in Gasparilla when its chassis collapsed on him around 12:30 p.m. on Sunday. A co-worker used a forklift to free Mungru, who was rushed to the San Fernando General Hospital. Unfortunately, he succumbed to his injuries at around 1:45 p.m. Investigations are ongoing. Investigators are seeking guidance from the Director of Public Prosecutions regarding charges against 3 relatives involved in the assault of a 1-year-old girl. The child was rescued last Wednesday after a video surfaced online showing her and another toddler being abused. Acting on intelligence, officers led by ACP Wayne Meister found the children at a home in Claxton Bay. The 1-year-old, found struggling to breathe and covered in bruises, was taken for medical care. She is now in stable condition. The investigation by the Child Protection Unit continues. Beverly Ramsey Moore was re-elected president of Pantry and Bago during an election of the Central Executive Officers at Mokorapo Secondary School in St. James on October 6th. Ramsey Moore secured 225 votes to reclaim the presidency. Outgoing trustee Terry Bernard was elected vice president with 223 votes. Denise L.J. Hernandez was elected secretary with 229 votes, and Ingrid Weeks was elected assistant secretary with 233 votes. Candice Andrews-Beaumont is education officer, winning the seat with 234 votes. Lauren Pear was re-elected treasurer, earning 241 votes. Internationally, a British doctor on Monday pleaded guilty to an audacious but unsuccessful plot to kill his mother's partner with a fake COVID-19 vaccine, which involved him forging medical documents and dressing in disguise to inject his victim with poison. Thomas Kwan, 53, passed himself off as a nurse and even took his own mother's blood pressure before administering poison to her partner. Patrick O'Hara in Newcastle, Northern England. O'Hara survived but suffered from necrotizing fasciitis, a potentially fatal flesh-eating bacterial infection, after receiving the jab, prosecutors said. Kwan, a family doctor in Sunderland, pleaded guilty to attempted murder on Monday, shortly after his trial began at Newcastle Crown Court last week, court staff said. He had previously admitted a charge of administering a noxious substance. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capsule, and I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition of the program. Trinidad and Tobago's food import bill is approximately $7.3 billion. That's quite a staggering figure. In 2022, it was approximately $7.2 billion. But for years before that, it actually hovered around $5 billion. If you recall, in 2021, Minister of Trade and Industry Paul Agopi-Scoon noted that Trinidad and Tobago spent approximately $78 million a year over the 3 previous years on luxury food items such as apples, grapes, etc. It was also revealed by the former Minister of Agriculture that Trinidad and Tobago spent approximately $669 million annually on alcohol imports. Now, these figures are rather incredible, particularly noting the Minister of Finance stating that food security was a top priority of the government. And he also reiterated the point that the government was working to achieve CARICOM's aim of reducing our food import bill by 25% in 2025. Now, since then, many have argued that that figure is unrealistic. But what does this figure, 7.3 billion, mean in respect to our own domestic markets and our food security situation? I'm joined this morning by the former Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture at the UWI St. Augustine, Dr. Wayne Ganpert. Good morning, Dr. Ganpert, and thank you very much for joining me on the program.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Ganpert, the figure, of course, is staggering, $7.3 billion in food imports, and one really can't argue against that. But what does it suggest about our food security situation in Trinidad and Tobago? Is this figure, this trend of increasing food prices annually, more and more worrying?
Yes, well, I think everybody will say it's more and more worrying because unfortunately, when you look into the horizon, it's only going to get incrementally higher over the years if things don't change, if we don't do things differently, and if things don't impact us differently. I remember that high food import bill is a result of many factors. And it's really because of, I think everybody knows it's because Trinidad really does not produce the amount of food on the ground that we are supposed to do, and we have to import. And when we import, we subjected to everything that out there that impacts costs of not only food, but everything. So you have when the price of oil rises, we have food prices going up. And then you had, within the last few years, we had the pandemic that skyrocketed food prices. Hopefully we won't have any more pandemics, but we have a lot of disruptive events around the world, wars breaking out here and there, or threats of wars at least, And these things all send up prices because shipping are impacted, etc. And more than that, covering all of that is climate change, which is impacting food all over the world, especially in our importing countries where we import our big ticket items from wheat and corn and soya. Those prices and meats, those countries are impacted. So the food prices are going to keep rising. And once we have to buy and import food, our food import bill is going to steadily increase. Yeah.
Dr. Gunput, is it too? I know you said it's made up of multiple factors, which I understand and you just explained. But is it too that Trinidad and Tobago finds itself in a position where importing food, even though $7.3 billion is quite a high figure, at this current time is cheaper than producing our own food?
Well, it might be cheaper than producing our own food to some extent. Yeah, but we have to really look at ways to get food cheaper in our country, which is limited by land. We have to use technology. When you enter university, they tell you land, labor, and capital are the three factors that impact food production. And all that has gone because technology is the main factor that impacts food production now. Covers everything. And if you use technology, you can grow lots of food in limited land space with much less labor. I mean, you could just think about all these smart devices and technologies we have now to grow food. So, and land, we're limited by land, but land is not, a lot of things can be grown with much less land, high intensive crops and livestock. So therefore, we could produce some food at lower prices, maybe not as low as we would get them imported. But then we have to look, our whole food security. Well, let me see. We have to look at the concept of food sovereignty, which is also very important that we have to grow what we eat, as I say, and eat what we grow. And we have to have enough food on the ground in Trinidad and Tobago at all times to feed our population. Now, the Minister of Trade and Industry, I remember, says during the pandemic that we usually had 3 months cover of food or something like that. Well, we need to have 3 months cover or in case of some emergency outside or within the region, There could be an emergency within the region where a lot of our food that we're depending on under the 25 by 25 initiative should come from Guyana and other countries. If something disrupts that, we need to have enough food on the ground. When I say on the ground, we need to have enough food in Trinidad and Tobago for at least a couple months cover. So we need to have the basics. We need to have carbohydrates, whether it's rice or corn. We need to have some protein, whether it's from small livestock. We're fairly well versed in vegetables, and one good thing about the pandemic is that people learn to grow all their vegetables around their home. So we need to have that on the ground. So it might be costlier. It might be a little costlier, but we need to have that for ourselves. So, yeah.
But if that is the case, is reducing this bill, 7.3 billion, and focusing more so, as you said, food sovereignty, grow what you eat and eat what you grow, is that an easy fix? Is that something that is easily achievable?
Well, no, because that speaks about long-term behavioral change. Because to get people to eat what you grow means that we have to start from very young in the schools, trying to adjust tastes of the young people. We have successfully adjusted the tastes of our young people from our local products to our foreign products. So all of them want to go to these foreign franchises and get these nice slabs of meat and foreign teas and foreign coffee and all the exotic foods. We have successfully done that because by inaction, we didn't take action to really look at that and see that is really a lot of those items, those luxurious foods are what count for a good portion of that food import bill. So we have to now roll back that and try to adjust from the young people, and all young people, and probably middle-aged people by now, because that's the way it is, our food tastes back to our local foods. But let me say something about the food import bill. The food import bill, it looks staggering, but remember this food import bill is a kind of, to get into this food import bill and to see what it really takes for this food import bill. I don't know that so much of it is food for what we eat. A lot of it, Clarence Rambrad said, a lot of it, nearly 700 million of that was alcohol. Mrs. Paula Gopi-Schoon said a lot of it is cereal, exotic foods, lobsters and crayfish and imported this and that and the other. So we chop all those off, of the food that we have. Then a lot of products for forestry and wood and all these kind of things are in that. Furthermore, in that mix, Trinidad is a manufacturer, a processor of food for the rest of the Caribbean. So a lot of food comes into Trinidad bulk. We buy that, process it because of our industry, and re-export it to the Caribbean. So all that comes under food and our food import bill. So the food import bill looks 7 point something. I don't know it's 7 point something. It could be significantly lower. However, whatever figure it is unsustainable because it's still going to rise and we still need to bring it down.
Putting it into context, thank you very much for that, Dr. Gunpowder. That's a very, very good point indeed. In respect to efforts going forward, the major undertakings or intentions of the government for the next year is to focus on products and crops such as coffee, cocoa, coconuts, rice, etc. I mean, you would have heard of that last week. Again, those industries in particular are just starts, but are those the industries or the products that we should be focusing on at this point? Is it easy to revitalize those industries as a start?
As a start, yes, because we have significant experience in cocoa especially, work done by Professor Umaran at UE and others before him. We have significant in coconuts, that coconuts we could really experience phenomenal growth in coconut. But remember, these things are not what I would call food. We're really producing them to export to get foreign exchange, import, to get foreign exchange. Things like rice, however, which is a basic. the government is making, significant efforts to really ramp up our rice production. We want to get at least 50% of our rice grown locally. And I will tell you that is achievable. The ministry has a good model for doing that. They have a committee. There is a committee in place, which is composed of all the very experienced rice farmers in Trinidad, and they are really on board to produce this rice. So I think we could get some rice going based on the experiences that all our farmers have and the technologies from Guyana. So rice is one thing that we could, in the next year or two, see some significant improvement, which is very good. That model needs to be copied to other carbohydrates like root crops, sweet potato, yam, dash, all these kinds of things. We can't eat rice every day. We need to vary that carbohydrate source. So we need that model to ramp up other aspects so that we can have some food on the ground. And then I always talk about the plate of food there. You need some carbohydrates, you need some protein, and you need oils, oils and fats, yes, but you need some vegetables, right? So protein source. We import a lot of meat, and we import a whole lot of chicken. You know how much chicken we eat, right? Trinidad, one of the largest consumers of chicken in the region. And what we do with chicken, we don't grow feed for them. In the region, the food import bill in the region, 40% of it is livestock feed for livestock. And most of that, now, it may be the same similar for Trinidad, but the livestock feed we're talking about, because we don't grow much cattle and sheep and goat, but the feed is corn and soya for growing poultry, for chicken. So that is something that we have to adjust also, the amount of thing that we did. So as I come back to the small livestock, or sheep and goat, we have to ramp up those industries. So I'm saying in the short term, rice, root crops, sheep and goat production, and the other protein sources, particularly for under-resourced people, like that they could use around their homes, their backyard systems. That we can't just think about the whole the marketplace. We have to think about the people around their homes. They could grow some small livestock, chickens. They could grow ducks. And quail is a very important source of protein that we have not explored. I have explored that at UE. We could raise quail. Quail is simple to raise, as a high protein source. The meat efficiency is very high, and just people could do that. So we all could make an effort towards, towards having that balanced diet. Food security. The very definition of food security says all people at all times must have access to safe and nutritious food at affordable prices, So we could make efforts in that regard if we have some dedicated efforts.
So linking what you said previously and your last response there, when you're also speaking about you have to look at a plate of food, and those foods must consist of varieties. It can't just always be rice, for example, for carbohydrates. What is the relationship between food sovereignty and nutrition security?
Nutrition security, well, yeah, nutrition security, we must have, our food sovereignty, the food that we produce must also be of high nutritive value. We just can't stop importing a luxurious food item and continue with that. So we need to have local foods produced. For years, people talking about breadfruit production. Breadfruit as a staple. And that is something that there are people in the field there who are constantly working behind the scene to propagate and to bring forward the idea that breadfruit could grow. I remember Mr. Bmobile, he's up and down Trinidad distributing breadfruit plant because he knows something that the rest of us don't know and have not bought into it, that breadfruit in its multiple forms, when you add value to it, could be available as a source of, and that is what I talk about, food sovereignty, but also high nutritive value, you understand? So it's just one example of things that we are other crops that we have that we could substitute to cut down on our foreign exchange, cut down on our food that we could grow locally, that we have to adjust our taste to, that is of equal, if not higher nutritive value. You know, we tend to buy into the advertisements that these things from foreign are good and they have high nutritive value, etc., etc. It's only because we have not done the research to show how high in nutrition our local products are. Even if we have done the research, we don't communicate it well to the public to know that, you know, some of our products are much better than others that we import out there. I mean, just think about it. If we grow our meat locally, I mean, if we import meat, it could be weeks, it could be months before that animal is slaughtered, before it reaches your plate. But in Trinidad, you could get fresh meat, you know, you could get from Friday, and Sunday it could be on your plate, or even Saturday, you understand? So fresh produce is always much better, much higher in nutrition, and much better for our population all around.
Let's speak about that for a moment in respect to research, technology, science. Obviously, a part of us transforming our agricultural sector for our overall food security would involve the adoption of science and research, and particularly modern technology. In respect to Trinidad and Tobago's current position, how do we fare in respect to the adoption of technology, such technologies, modern technologies, really, in an effort to combat the situation that we find ourselves in?
Right. So, you know, farmers do adopt technologies, and they do adopt modern technologies, but not at the rate that they are supposed that we need to happen in this country. And that would require some massive education, communication effort, dedicated resources, you know, by the people who are tasked to educate them, which is the government and the extension services provided, because the technologies are available. I mean, we have 100 years or more of science and technology in agriculture at the University of the West Indies in the Faculty of Food and Agriculture. So we have lots of information around there to really disseminate to farmers to help them to adopt this. Now, and then we also need, on the other hand, the Ministry of Youth are really training young people into agriculture. Now, those are nice initiatives because they're really bringing them into the technology, protected agriculture, which is greenhouse and shade houses, and they're bringing them into aquaculture and probably aquaponics. So those are some of the things that they might be intensive, but they lend themselves to greater use of technologies that will attract young people. And in that regard, we could produce food. So it is happening, but not at the rate. And so there is hope, you know, I mean, that young people, a lot of post-pandemic, and within recent, a lot of people are agri-entrepreneurs getting into this thing. But this is just production, and you have the whole set of activities beyond production, which is post-production, which is value addition, transforming a product from one form to a variety of other forms so that they have longer shelf life. They probably, you know, they blended and they have different tastes and all this kind of thing. So that's our whole area there that we have significant technologies to do also. These things cost, and people to do these things, people need support. They will need support. Now, there are grants and there are incentives, but, you know, sometimes people just simply cannot access these, or they don't know where to access them in spite of all the communication. You would think everybody would know, but they don't know where to access them. They don't know how much they could access them. I mean, there are grants available to farmers. I know that one of the major banks have a very favorable loan arrangements for farmers. You know, they could take, and they don't even have to come with, you know, the biggest issue with borrowing money to get into agriculture is security of tenure. You know, and this bank is not taking security of tenure. It is not an absolute necessity. So there are opportunities out there, but is it communicated to the people? I think we need a much bigger effort to do this, to get more people into that net of production, both on the farm and post-production, so that we can really have some food, you know, I mean, in a short time, because remember, this food import bill going up more and more, and we don't know what's around the corner. Things don't look too kosher on, you know, on the international front. wars and rumors of wars, and climate change is getting more and more dramatic. This is not a change again. It's the crisis that we are in, right? So that is going to impact food production in us. So we have to take efforts urgently.
As you said, it's especially with climate changes, it's not necessarily a change as such, but the crisis that we find ourselves in is evolving. Even in respect to the weather patterns, they're becoming more and more intense. But Dr. Gunpad, in that regard, going back to what you said previously in this discussion, in respect to putting our food import bill into context, and you noting that TNT is a manufacturer for the rest of the Caribbean, so that food import bill will account for those products that come to Trinidad as well, and then are distributed to the Caribbean. Even if we start focusing more and more on our agricultural industry, and we start farming and producing more and more local products, even if we achieve such with meats, as you point out, carbohydrates, as previously discussed, is it still a possibility that our food import bill will always remain high, not only because of cheap imports, but also because of us being a manufacturing hub?
Yes. Well, as other countries develop their own manufacturing base, and they find it cheaper to import from elsewhere, we will lose that market to some extent. But it's a market. It's not all that big, but remember the product that comes in, the bulk product that comes in, is on our food import bill. Now, what I think is needed is somebody needs to look at the food import bill. Some of the economists need to look at the food import bill and see what is actually food and what is really could be classified as non-food and what is luxurious food. And then we could take, see what is the true status of our food bill, the food that we required for the life, for sustenance, for nutrition, and all this kind for our daily dietary needs. That's the food that we really need to look at. So it will, it will be lower, but it will always continue to rise until there will be a time. Remember, a lot of the efforts of the young people getting into agriculture and all these kind of things, and those efforts and the rights, it will take a time because you're not going to have your first crop. These young people, when they go out on the farm, they're going to be a few years, believe you me, a few years before they could bring something successful, And
And
somebody has to manage the production so that all of them don't go into the field and produce tomato and pak choy and lettuce, you understand? And I'm not seeing that. I'm not privy to that arrangement. Who's arranging the production that they will have a wide diversity, a variety of foods and livestock that's coming on the market.
well, it also, as you mentioned, has to do with changing our taste as well. Our taste patterns have to change as well. Dr. Gunpad, before you go, finally, as I mentioned earlier, the efforts in respect to certain crops and products, coffee, cocoa, rice, etc. Are there any other, at this particular point in time, areas that we need greater focus on, in particular, any crops? Again, no, you pointed out carbohydrates and meats earlier, but at this point in time, are there any other areas that you think need greater focus in respect to being a easy start, or for TNT in respect to its efforts?
Well, I think the ones that we have identified are really the main ones that we need to look at, just to put on our plate, and it's just for bulk food. But if you want to improve the nutrition of our diets, we need to look at a variety of sources of our protein and vegetables. So, we need to have these young people who in these shade houses and thing system, produce crops that are, not the normal lettuce, pak choy, and this kind of thing, but they produce kale and, other crops that have a high nutritive value that could really bring some nutrition to the plate. Because really and truly, as we continue to diversify, we need to improve our health, our national health, because the food that we eat, all these foreign foods that we import, energy dense foods, are really taking an impact on NCDs, high levels of NCDs, obesity, and hypertension and heart disease. in our country, and it's a burden on our healthcare system. So that is also another area that we need to really change the types of crops that we grow and vary our diet. Our plate must be high in not only food to fill our bellies, but it must also be of high nutritive value going forward. So there are things that we can do, and I think we're starting in the right direction. It's not going to happen now, and you know that nothing derails these processes. You know, we should see some incremental increases in food production on the ground. And as young people get in, you know, we should adjust tastes and all this kind of thing. But it's going to be a little while. And then the food import bill, Keaton, is that we're really subjected to what happens on the outside. We could do everything possible to reduce our food import bill. But if something happens on the outside, our food, and we continue to import, so we have to reduce that import. CARICOM has set the 25 by 25 initiative to reduce the food import bill by 25% by 2025, so that there are efforts around the region. And every country is supposed to follow suit. So there are efforts in those regards. And 25, we might think is a modest figure, but we need to really bring that figure much higher over the next couple of years. We were there once, we never imported all that food that we had. So we need to go back to that, to the right things.
Indeed, Dr. Gunpert, I want to thank you very much for your time this morning and for putting everything into context so that there is a better understanding as per our situation and just where we can go from here. So thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to the next conversation.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure speaking with you and the audience.
Indeed. So all the very best. Keep well.
Yep.
Take care.
Yep. Bye.
Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Gunpert joining us on the program this morning. What I could really appreciate is that he has put that figure into context in relation to our food import bill. And as he mentioned, it's not necessarily an easy fix, but there are areas of which we can start. And there are a number of factors which need to be examined. And of course, it's continuous examination over the course of this process. We can't just say, hey, listen, we're going to start this. This is what we're going to do. No, even in respect encouraging young farmers, as Dr. Gunpert points out, in order to avoid a glut on the market, we also need to examine exactly who is growing what, who is producing what, so that there is also a variety and also, of course, equitable distribution. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a break here on AM Prime. We will return shortly as the conversations continue. Stay with us.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movie Town, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being with us this morning. I mentioned it last week off air. I've had some conversations with some colleagues, and every morning you hear a name that I call. You hear two names, in Mildwood and Ryan Gomez-Burke. But in conversations that I've had with Ryan Gomez-Burke, he seems to be a Trinidad and Tobago encyclopedia. His knowledge of our history and where we were as a nation, and being able to give you a timeline as to where we were, where we are heading, it's incredible. And he's pointed it out on a number of occasions that Tobago, and again, you would have heard me stress about this, Tobago had the capability, at one point was producing food for not only itself, but for Trinidad. And yet all that seems to have really faded away. It's the best way to describe it. It's non-existent. Again, in conversations that I've had, it was pointed out that it became so cheap to import food because cash was flowing in Trinidad. Cash was king. We had US dollars, and it became so easy to just import food rather than actually continue to support our local food markets. And that's where the other Tim Dutch disease came into play. We concentrated so much on one booming sector, our energy sector dominated, that we tended to ignore the development of other industries. And that's exactly where the government of today is struggling because of mistakes of governments of the past. Because of that ignorance, it has become so difficult to start back up industries, not only because the experienced individuals are no longer there, but there are people that are no longer willing to actually participate in that. Dr. Gunpert pointed it out, it's going to be years before young farmers actually see their very first crops. It's going to take some time for that to happen. And that in itself will actually turn people away. Now, ease of doing business and banking alone, access to capital is a major problem. So even if young people are interested in setting up farms, they don't necessarily have access to financing, access to technologies that are able to actually help in respect to that startup. So those are issues to point out. But I raised the fact of Tobago again, because this situation that we find ourselves in, I don't need to stress the point. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous. It can't be that our food that we consume is dictated so much by international pressures and international markets. But that's the situation that we simply found ourselves in. In the 1990s, we were producing over 25,000 tons of metric tons of rice. Yeah, that's what TNT was producing. Now, annually, it's approximately 500 plus metric tons of rice. Look at that dramatic drop in 2024. 90% of the rice that we consume comes from Ghana. In fact, we spend over 30 million US annually in importing parboiled rice. And even though I know that there were efforts to try and help that market in respect to a parboiled rice processing plant, if I'm not mistaken, it was in Cuba, no further word. There was an entire ceremony opening up that particular facility. Nothing further in respect to its operations or where it is going, where it is headed, even if it's still happening or taking place. So all these things really can be very, very infuriating. I come back to the other point, and I know people say you cannot focus on the glory days, you cannot focus on the past is the past. But the point I'm stressing is that we had it. TNT had it. We were there. It is something that was happening. And by no good reasoning or by no good excuse, there was a rapid decline. Have you heard of the Buffalo? I'm sure that many younger generations are not aware of the Buffalo, but it is something that we developed here in Trinidad and Tobago. The meat was so high in quality and so lean. It's one of a kind. No, Buffalo still exists. It does still exist, by the way. And you can find it down in the east. I know that the Ministry of Agriculture does have a farm in which Buffalo still exists. But the thing is, we're not even producing it as a product for the market anymore. Now, I believe at one point in time, the argument suggests that it simply was not sustainable, that people did not care for the meat as such, or it was becoming too expensive to produce. My research on buffalo in respect to that regard is limited, so I can't say much for that. But the point is, again, it existed in 2024 when technologies are more easily accessible for government as compared to farmers, of course. What is it in relation to the buffalo that cannot be a viable product on the market once more? These are things that need to be explored. These are conversations that need to be had. Focusing on industries such as cocoa, coconut, coffee, rice, it's admirable. It's a good start. But those are industries that already have individuals who are fighting. Rice, for example, has 15 farmers who are fighting to ensure that the industry survives. They are very much fighting. They're not necessarily getting the support. So if the government is going to focus on that, it means the government is going to pump money in respect to supporting it. But the government needs to look at other areas to invest in, to start up. These are industries that already have a startup. We need to look at other industries as well. Cocoa, for example. Our cocoa is well renowned. We have many cocoa farmers in Trinidad and Tobago who lament the fact that we don't necessarily have the land or the support for our cocoa beans and the production of our cocoa beans. Now, climate change has affected our cocoa bean production as well. That is a huge factor in which we're seeing less and less yield. We had a discussion about that earlier this year on AM Prime when we spoke to 2 cocoa farmers. Of course, there are also pests as well associated with that, but at least there are efforts in relation to such pests, and the pests that I speak about are not necessarily mites, but more so parrots that are destroying our products. And I know oftentimes if we speak about birds, it's also with the cockroach. When you're planting peas in Tobago, even the Prime Minister lamented on that when he was growing up. But there are efforts to address that. That's the thing. So, again, admirable, but we already have startups there. We are already exporting cocoa products globally. And when I say globally, I'm not just speaking about to the United States, but there are markets in China, Japan, Asia as a whole, and Europe that love our cocoa. The quality of that, it's far superior. Now, coffee as well is quite amazing. There are estates in Trinidad and Tobago which are producing its own coffee. When I say its own coffee, I don't just mean the beans. I'm talking about the actual product, the grounded, roasted coffee beans. That is available for sale in TNT. It's locally produced. So again, it's incredible. Now, that industry, to me, from the knowledge that I have, will need a lot more government support, obviously. But again, there are startups that exist. The same thing with coconut. The coconut industry, unfortunately, has been hit very hard, not just by climate change, but by the red ring disease as well. Boy, talk about the destruction from that beetle. That has really depleted our coconut resources. Imagine you're paying $15 for a coconut. I've gotten some reports of people paying $18 for a coconut in TNT within the last year. That's absolutely ridiculous. But even though those issues exist, we actually had individuals in Trinidad who were studying the red ring disease, who were trying to find solutions. And I don't know what's happened to that research. It's just gone silent. But the point is we recognize those issues. These industries have startups. Hopefully, even though the government said they intend to support it, they actually stick to their word, because agriculture saw a reduction in its allocation this year, which is incredible. That is what I mean. Office of the Prime Minister got a great increase in their allocation. Agriculture got a significant reduction. So I am going to be optimistic. I will be optimistic, but we'll see what happens. Moving forward, ladies and gentlemen, conversation that we were due to have this morning unfortunately has not happened for whatever the reason may be, but it was in respect to the National Carnival Commission. Now, they have efforts to try and take TNT's unique taste of carnival, our carnival celebrations, our culture, to the world, and that is the NCC Stakeholder Meet and Greet. Now, this was an event that was, I'm using the term was, due to be held at Miami Broward Carnival 2024. The latest coming out of that committee as of Sunday morning was that Carnival was still happening, although there were evacuation orders for various parts of the state of Florida because of Hurricane Milton, which is expected to hit between tomorrow morning and Thursday, somewhere between there. So I'm not so sure if Carnival is still on for Miami, given the events that are happening. But the NCC planned to have as NCC stakeholder meet and greet. Now, this is not the first time. It did happen last year, and it was hailed as a success by the NCC. It was geared as a forum aimed towards discussions and information sharing about our carnival with various stakeholders abroad. It's part of an ongoing international effort in respect to the NCC to promote our carnival abroad. So we certainly could champion that. But to tie that in, the question is, how can we continue beyond just these meet and greet discussions? How can we promote our culture in other countries? The potential in respect to our artist and our artiste is there. The international markets, are they being exploited? Surely they're being explored, but how long are we going to be in an exploration phase? Every year we speak about exploring. What about exploiting those markets? What about the promotion of our local talent on these markets? Look at Notting Hill Carnival, for example. Always speak about TNT's roots in Notting Hill Carnival. But does TNT have a greater role to play in such? Yes, we have our own carnival. October Carnival is happening in Tobago right now. But again, there are different forms of the economy that we need to be exploiting at this point, and one of that is the orange economy. Surely we need to focus on our domestic market first. I totally understand that. I get that, and I would say greater focus needs to be paid there. However, with that being said, we also, hand in hand, need to explore opportunities abroad, because foreign exchange is a major issue as well, and these are one of the ways that we can gain foreign exchange. It's one of the ways that we could export our talent. It's one of the ways that we could export our culture and earn income. So, kudos to the National Carnival Commission for their efforts and their role that they're playing in respect to that. But, I say, it's time to start changing the terms from exploring to exploitation, because that's the situation that we find ourselves in. In fact, it shouldn't have taken a severe decline in our oil and gas production and our revenues earned from that industry to start realizing, hold up, these are potentials, these are avenues, these are things that we should have been doing a long time ago. We all love it when we see a Trini flag being waved abroad. We all love it when we meet a Trini abroad. They say everywhere you go, you'll always find a Trini in this world. You will always find a Trini. People love soca. Look at what's happening in Japan. Japan has had its carnival, and I think those celebrations are still going on. But Japan is a major avenue in respect to soca. They love our soca there. What are we doing to exploit that particular market? You'd be amazed, but Central Europe is a market for chutney soca. They love chutney soca there. What are we doing to exploit that market? They should be national initiatives, and it shouldn't just be taken upon artists to have to find ways in order to go on these tours to earn a source of living. Trinidad and Tobago, there are markets to be exploited. I hope we start doing such. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break here on the program. I think I've spoken enough. I've given enough of a monologue. I am not Shawn Michael Small to do that. Kudos to him when he can go 30 minutes non-stop speaking. But I've said enough. I hope you've learned something. I hope we've kind of stimulated your mind a bit and you've created an opinion. And hopefully these conversations, every time we have them, it rises a step above. And it's not just the same words over and over again. Let's take a break here on AM Prime. We will return shortly.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
And I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the corresponding banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Gasparilla mechanic dies in tragic workplace accident. 3 relatives detained in assault of 1-year-old girl. And internationally, doctor admits attempting to kill mother's partner with fake COVID-19 shot. Now for the details. A mechanic from Gasparilla has died after being critically injured while working on a dump truck. Police say Gavin Mungru was under the truck at Bull Fabricators in Gasparilla when its chassis collapsed on him around 12:30 p.m. on Sunday. A co-worker used a forklift to free Mungru, who was rushed to the San Fernando General Hospital. Unfortunately, he succumbed to his injuries at around 1:45 p.m. Investigations are ongoing. Investigators are seeking guidance from the Director of Public Prosecutions regarding charges against 3 relatives involved in the assault of a 1-year-old girl. The child was rescued last Wednesday after a video surfaced online showing her and another toddler being abused. Acting on intelligence, officers led by ACP Wayne Meister found the children at a home in Claxton Bay. The 1-year-old, found struggling to breathe and covered in bruises, was taken for medical care. She is now in stable condition. The investigation by the Child Protection Unit continues. Beverly Ramsey Moore was re-elected president of Pantry and Bago during an election of the Central Executive Officers at Mokarapo Secondary School in St. James on October 6th. Ramsey Moore secured 225 votes to reclaim the presidency. Outgoing trustee Terry Bernard was elected vice president with 223 votes. Denise L.J. Hernandez was elected secretary with 229 votes, and Ingrid Weeks was elected assistant secretary with 233 votes. Candice Andrews-Beaumont is education officer, winning the seat with 234 votes. Lauren Pear was re-elected treasurer, earning 241 votes. Internationally, a British doctor on Monday pleaded guilty to an audacious but unsuccessful plot to kill his mother's partner with a fake COVID-19 vaccine, which involved him forging medical documents and dressing in disguise to inject his victim with poison. Thomas Kwan, 53, passed himself off as a nurse and even took his own mother's blood pressure before administering poison to her partner. Patrick O'Hara in Newcastle, Northern England. O'Hara survived but suffered from necrotizing fasciitis, a potentially fatal flesh-eating bacterial infection, after receiving the jab, prosecutors said. Kwan, a family doctor in Sunderland, pleaded guilty to attempted murder on Monday, shortly after his trial began at Newcastle Crown Court last week, court staff said. He had previously admitted a charge of administering a noxious substance. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Switching gears up a bit this morning and focusing more so on our marine biodiversity. What is happening in Tobago with respect to the coral reefs there? A significant coral bleaching event is taking place. The Institute of Marine Affairs is issued releasing that they're taking immediate action. But what is the severity of the situation, and what does it mean for the future of Tobago's corals? I'm joined this morning by, I think at this point, it's best I say our resident coral reef ecologist, Dr. Anthony Goodneys. Good morning, Dr. Goodneys. It's good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. I like that title. I'm going to keep it. A pleasure to be on again. In terms of Tobago, yes, we are monitoring coral bleaching at the moment. We have been communicating with our towboat operators, our divers in Tobago to find out what's happening underneath. And it's not good news, especially for like Northeast Tobago.
Oh, not good news. Could you please tell us a bit more in respect to that? How severe is the situation if it's not good news?
Yeah, so when the IMA, we were in Tobago from July to the early parts of September, and we noticed that it was quite warm, and you know, not surprisingly, NOAA released the alert level bleaching 2. And we were noticing a lot of peeling corals when we were doing our work, and we got reports that in Charlottesville there's quite the significant bleaching of our brain corals. Some of our other species are bleaching, not as badly, but the brain corals aren't doing very well. In Southwest there is some bleaching as well, and we'll continue to request or seek reports of what's happening underwater. If it gets really severe, we will try and go and do a proper assessment to see how it compares to last year, because we also had a marine heat wave last year, but this year it seems to be a little bit worse.
Oh, well, a marine heat wave. Well, before I get to that particular team, you said level 2 bleaching events. What are the various levels in respect to bleaching events?
Yeah, so NOAA originally, in their original model, they have virtual stations around the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago being one of them. There are two levels of bleaching alerts. Before that, you have bleaching warning, which means that, there might be bleaching, there might not, but the corals are stressed. Then you have bleaching alert level 1, where it is likelihood that there is widespread bleaching, and then level 2 means severe likelihood of mortality associated with the bleaching. So just to recap, when the corals are bleaching, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to die. It means that they've just lost their symbiotic algae, which is that important food source for them, right? If the heat stress extends for a long period of time, then it is more likely that they will die because they don't have that regular food supply, and it is hot, so they're naturally stressed out. NOAA's actually increased those levels this year, so they're now implementing up to level 5 bleaching, because what they found is that every year we're getting up to bleaching level 2, but there's not these specific we still don't know how warm it can get, right? So they've extended bleaching up to level 5, which means that you can have, essentially widespread mortality of up to 80% of your corals on the reef. So if we were to use the new scale, I would say we are about level 3, I reckon, in terms of the new scale.
In respect to being level 3, what does that suggest about the potential loss of corals across Tobago's ecosystems?
So we are sort of bracing for high levels of mortality. Last year, we did notice quite a lot of bleaching, but the mortality was much lower. So we're hopeful that that might be the case now. But when you have back-to-back years of bleaching or heat stress, corals are less capable of tolerating that for over 2 years, right? So we definitely expect more mortality, unfortunately, which means that a lot of the brain corals, which are dominant along Tobago's reefs, are likely to die. And you would definitely notice a change in the reef populations and the organisms that depend on them.
Crikey. In that respect as well, I know you mentioned that this is the second consecutive year of which we're seeing this, and you mentioned a marine heat wave, of which I am familiar with that term. I think that's sea level is reaching that 29 degrees threshold. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But if that is the case, looking towards the future, is this something that is most likely to continue?
Unfortunately, yes. So with climate change, we are going to get more frequent and severe marine heat waves. And as you mentioned, it happens when the water temperatures, especially during our summer months, get a bit too warm. So we have heat waves on land where the air temperature spikes. It's the same thing in the water. And we do expect to get more severe heat waves into the future.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is the thing, our coral reefs in Tobago, well, across the world, are under stress. And I'm bringing another aspect here because I believe it was earlier this year, there was another warning issued for the coral reefs of Tobago, and that is with the stony coral tissue loss disease. And I remember reading about it and hearing about it. Is that something that the coral reefs are also experiencing at this point in time, or has the warning remained a warning?
It's a warning for now. We are trying to build our capacity in monitoring and reducing the spread of the disease. This disease started in Florida in 2014, and it's made its way across the Caribbean. And Tobago is always the last to be hit, unfortunately. Well, it's good that it's the last to be hit, but it is a very delayed effect in terms of getting impacted by diseases from the Caribbean. We are definitely going to be looking out for any disease outbreaks after the marine heat wave. So if the corals don't bleach and die, they're more stressed out. And when you think about your immune system, if your immune system is low, you're more likely to get infected by a disease. And that's the situation with corals as well.
But Dr. Ganesh, with all these factors that are stressing the coral reefs and with the mortality rate expected to be high, what does this suggest about the environment and the ecosystem around Tobago's water? If these coral reefs die, exactly what is the cost of their death?
That's a good question. So we depend a lot on our reefs for our tourism, our fisheries, and I don't think it is it's going to be immediate, the impact to our costs, right? So when you think about things like our sargassum that's washing up on our shores, those are much more visible in terms of the costs to our tourism, to our economy and whatnot. You might get a delay in terms of the impacts to fisheries and whatnot, because people always think, coral bleaching, the corals are dying, but the fish are also stressed out. Last year we had a red tide associated with the marine heat wave, which resulted in a fish kill. And so, the corals are the most visibly stressed, but the other organisms, the marine sponges, the lobsters, the conch, a lot of our commercial species will also be feeling the heat. And that affects things like its reproduction, it affects its survival and overall health. And so we will start seeing shifts, and we probably have already seen shifts in the, how it affects our tourism and whatnot, especially when you think of climate change, you have to think regionally, and as a Caribbean region, you have seen the impacts of climate change affecting economies already.
What about if water temperatures and these marine heat waves have become more and more prominent? What does this suggest about coral ecosystems' ability to regenerate and for, hopefully a positive shift from what we're currently experiencing?
And that's a good question. I think it'll allow me to sort of explain some of the work that IMA will do. So corals can naturally adapt to things, and all organisms could naturally adapt to changes in climate, changes in weather and temperature conditions. And what happens is that a healthy ecosystem, so ecosystem that's not impacted by chronic issues like overexploitation, dredging, sedimentation, pollution, they tend to bounce back better than systems that are compromised by these chronic issues. So if akin to your body, if you keep your body fit and healthy, you're more likely to bounce back from diseases or times of stress. And it's the same thing for coral reefs. And so essentially the main thing that we need to do is manage our reefs better, safeguard them when they're under times of stress, meaning, have this adaptive management where we can close off sections of the reef that are bleached, saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't fish here for a while, maybe, let's watch our pollution. And you have these long-term management things that you have to, management strategies that you implement. So manage what comes off the land that enters our ocean and stuff like that. The other thing about adaptation is the Marine Resilience Initiative that IMA is working on sort of enhancing that natural adaptation. So we're using a strategy that an organization called Seacor International is using, which is assisted fertilization, where during the spawning periods, we collect the sperm and eggs of corals and we mix them in order to increase the genetic diversity. And so we create coral young that have genetics that can maybe be more resilient to thermal stress or more resilient to disease. And we're sort of increasing the odds of survival into the future. And so we just started that strategy for Tobago, but the assisted fertilization strategies and restoration need to go hand in hand with management.
So does that suggest that the IMA has or is in the process of having coral farms?
So we don't call them coral farms. We call them we call it a crib. So like a nursery for corals, because you don't see them. They're very tiny. And in the study, from the work that Seacor did, they've been doing it for the last 10 years, and they actually had the opportunity to compare how their corals that were created through this assisted fertilization method fared against coral fragments from coral farming. and their parent populations from the last year's marine heat wave. And what they found is that their young corals fared better. So they had 90% of their populations that were through assisted fertilization were healthy compared to their parent populations, where they were up to 60% teaching in some populations around the Caribbean, which is good news, which means that the theory that if you have more genetic combinations, then it will work, that there is more resilience and more likelihood of corals being naturally more resilient to heat stress in the future.
So the environmental factor will have an impact in respect to the genetic makeup of corals?
Definitely. Yes. So unfortunately, we do expect more mortality of corals into the future, but I'm hoping it's with management and with the novel approach to restoration, we can sort of curb the level of loss.
Out of curiosity, though, it may be different for various coral species, but on average, how long does it take for a coral from being juvenile coral to mature coral, developed coral?
Yeah, so like you said, so branching corals grow a lot faster because they're in environments that they need to grow really fast to survive. They're in more wave-exposed environments, and so they can get large within 4 or 5 years. They can go from a very small coral to a coral the size of my hand. When you think majority of our corals in Tobago are massive and brain coral species, so those corals, when you're growing them from little spats or juvenile corals, they take generations to grow to the size that you see today. So our largest brain coral, they estimate as low as 300 years, but it can be as old as 1,000 years. We don't know for sure, but they take a long time to grow, and that's because they're in environments that are naturally disturbed in terms of like their sedimentation, in terms of the things that we naturally expose to in Tobago. But once they grow, they are very, very tolerant to their environment. They're very hardy.
So I know currently with respect to global warming and marine heat waves, that has had a great impact on Tobago coral reefs, as you referred to this morning. You explained it so brilliantly. But besides that, what is some of the other factors that are impacting upon our coral reef ecology? What are some of the things that we can do to try and assist in respect to the health of our coral reefs?
That's a good question. So as I mentioned before, there are a lot of chronic issues, right? And those are the issues that we have control over, right? So with respect to Tobago, land-based sources of pollution is a big issue. When you think about the rainy season and land clearing, and a lot of the agricultural runoff ends up in our oceans. And it's during the rainy season, so between July and September, where the corals are spawning. So that's a very vulnerable time. That's a time when they're trying to make their young, and it's the time of peak rainfall and runoff, right? So you can imagine that, a lot of our activities on land are really impacting the coral life cycle. The other thing is overexploitation. We really, really need to get some management on our fisheries. I mean, it's important for our population, and we do find that studies have shown that in well-managed systems, the fisheries continue to benefit, as well as the ecosystems that provide those benefits. So the coral reefs, the mangroves, the seagrasses. We really need to start putting plans into place and protecting them by law.
The thing is, though, Dr. Ganesh, I do recall, that there was an estimate, and I don't know if that is still in effect. You can probably educate me as to if that has changed. That we are, at one point, we were heading to losing about 90+% of our coral across the world by the year 2050. Again, if I'm not mistaken. It seems as though that we are well on course to reach that figure, if not by 2050, sooner. So again, these efforts now, would they have an immediate impact? We're hoping for a miracle here.
No, I mean, there's always be a future for marine ecosystems. What it looks like, it depends on our actions, right? So the structure that corals provide today that we have today were provided by corals 40 years before, right? So things will continue life will always find a way. It's just how we are the ones that would suffer the most from that loss, right? Corals have survived 5 mass extinctions in the history of the planet, right? And they have bounced back. And I keep telling people that the loss of coral reefs would be our loss, right? And so in terms of the grand scheme of things, when you think about the history of the world and those previous mortality events, corals, our natural ecosystems have been able to survive and adapt and recover through those events. It is our loss if we lose those ecosystems. We will feel it in our economy, we'll feel it in our culture, and in our children's futures. I think that's the most significant impact. So life will always find a way. It's just in our lifetime of humans, it's what future we are going to provide for our children.
Well, I guess it also speaks to the evolution of our ecosystems to adapt to the environment of what they're exposed to, what they're in. So, Dr. Ganesh, the situation is severe, though some hope exists. Now, you mentioned earlier that you're hoping that more and more people will report on these issues. How do they reach out to the IMA to report on such, or what are the authorities they should reach out to, if not the IMA?
So yes, IMA has a social media page. We have our web page with all the emergency contact information on it. Please reach out to us. You can call on the hotline. You can email. All the numbers are available on our website. And if you're in Tobago, you can also call the Department of Marine Resources and Fisheries and THA. We have posted all the contact information on our socials again.
Well, Dr. Ganesh, thank you very much for joining us once more on AM Prime. You've filled us a position, and I think you've kept it. So thank you so much for always finding the time to be with us and to discuss these issues, but also to point out where we're heading and the opportunities, the potentials, the hope that exist. Thank you so much, Dr. Ganesh.
Thank you.
All the best to you in your efforts and your continued work. Ladies and gentlemen, well, it's a second year in a row that we are having this conversation in respect to coral bleaching. And they say 3 times the charm. I'm really hoping that that does not apply here. I really hope that next year there is better news. But put it this way, with weather patterns becoming less and less predictable, because of global warming, because of climate change, we don't know what is going to happen next year. Hurricanes, typhoons are becoming more and more intense. That is one thing that we know. It's just becoming so hard to predict their patterns. I use that example to give you an understanding in respect to the oceans. We know that the oceans are getting warmer. There is an understanding that is happening. We're reaching that 29 degrees Celsius threshold. However, in respect to the patterns that exist, in respect to the efforts, we too, as human beings, are going to have to evolve to try and fight the situation, to try and assist in ensuring that our biodiversity, whether it be marine or land, actually survives. Because at this point, ladies and gentlemen, we as human beings have caused a lot of disruption, but we cannot afford to lose these creatures that share our planet with us. Everything works hand in hand, and hopefully the efforts of the IMA and Dr. Ganesh really come to fruition, and we see a lot more positive news coming out of there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for AM Prime. Thank you so much to my guests for joining me on the program this morning, and thank you, the viewer, for being with us. I hope that you learned something. I hope that your mind was stimulated, or your opinion opened up a bit more. So thank you very much for being with us. To my team at WESN, Ryan Gomez-Burke and Milewood, of course, for ensuring that AM Prime goes live, for their hard work behind the scenes. Thank you very much. And of course, to Naomi McNish for all our efforts in producing AM Prime. I'm Keaton Shaw, reminding you that today is a good day to have a good day, and I'll see you again, hopefully, very soon. Bye-bye.
Folks, we're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more as physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
Because vision doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia that's responsible for looting the country, and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe